In the heart of the archives, a grand journey begins, exploring the rise of the first Sith Lords, the 12 Dark Jedi exiled after the 100-year darkness. Led by Ajunta Pall, these outcasts were the architects of a dark legacy, their names forever etched in the history of the galaxy. These rebels, cast aside by the Jedi Order, defied the rules, studying forbidden arts like alchemy, and waging wars that would forever change the galaxy. Banishment led them to Korriban, where they encountered the Sith species, conquered them, and forged the Sith Empire. Each Dark Jedi had a story, from Ajunta Pall's tragic fall and redemption to Sorzus Syn's creation of monstrous Sith beasts and the Sith Code. These individuals, each with their own powers, rivalries, and ambitions, left legacies that would haunt generations. Through wars, betrayals, and unrelenting ambition, the Sith Empire rose and fell, shaping the future of the galaxy. Secrets long buried are about to be revealed, from cursed talismans to dueling mastery, and the pursuit of immortality. With everything pieced together, the origins of the Sith Order are laid bare, offering an unprecedented look at the exiles who forged the path of darkness, because today he would be exploring the origin of evil, tracing the first 12 Lords of the Sith from a time long before the galaxy knew their name, back when no one had yet claimed the title of Dark Lord. Once a Jedi like many others, Ajunta Pall rose to the rank of Master before he turned away, fascinated by mysteries buried deep within the Force. His search led him to the earliest days of the Order, when it still called itself the Jedi, keepers of balance between Ashla and Bogan, wielders of alchemy in temples that bound Kyber to steel and even gave wings to beasts. But where the Jedi abandoned those arts, believing life was to be guarded rather than twisted, Ajunta Pall saw only power waiting to be seized. A belief that set him on the path into shadow and shaped the legacy that birthed the Lords of the Sith. He believed that those who could touch the Force were bound to master it in every form, and so he plunged into alchemy, bending life in secret experiments that unlocked the gateway to the dark side. With these new powers, he gathered disciples within the Jedi ranks, those unwilling to abandon forbidden arts, and together they acted in shadows, fearing the judgment they knew would come. Inspired by the ancient memory of the first schism, when a Jedi named Zendor once broke from the Order, they remembered only the rebellion, not the truth of a man who had sought peace and was driven into war. To them, his defiance was a banner to follow. As their strength grew, whispers claimed they could command life itself, and pride consumed them until their secrets were uncovered. The Jedi denounced Ajunta Pall's teachings as corruption, a stain upon the Force, and branded him a servant of darkness. But before they could carry out their sentence, Ajunta struck first, cutting down his own master as a symbol of defiance, then rallying his followers to rise against those they now saw as oppressors. The Jedi, in turn, raised their blades, and so began a war that would scar the galaxy forever. A war that would scar the galaxy forever, the First Great Schism. In the dark depths of time, the Second Great Schism marked the beginning of the darkness. It wasn't a war at first, but rather the pivotal moment when the Jedi Order was torn asunder, dividing the Order into two opposing factions. The war that followed, known as the 100-Year Darkness, raged from the year 7000 to 6900 BB, as Dark Jedi clashed with the Jedi in a brutal battle across the galaxy. The Jedi, though determined, faced far more resistance than expected from their fallen comrades, who were far stronger than anticipated, though their mastery of the dark side was still in its infancy. Despite their arrogance, writings from these fallen Jedi revealed that they were once the Order's most powerful members, able to endure a century of war because of their extraordinary skill. To sustain themselves, the Dark Jedi used alchemical practices, extending their lifespans, while the Jedi had their long-lived masters, such as those from the Neti species who watched over the war. The brutal conflict reshaped the galaxy, igniting a fire that would burn for centuries to come. The Second Great Schism. This was the moment the Jedi Order was torn between the light and dark. It marked the beginning of the 100-Year Darkness, a conflict that spanned from 7000 to 6900 BB. This wasn't just a war, it was a brutal, galaxy-wide battle between the Jedi and the Dark Jedi. The Jedi thought it would be easy, like the First Schism, a war over in a year. But the Dark Jedi were stronger than they imagined. Even though their mastery of the dark side was rough, it amplified their incredible skill. Some said they were the finest Jedi ever, though that may have been their dark side arrogance. Speaking, there was truth to it. The Jedi couldn't have fought for a century if they weren't powerful. To survive that long, the Dark Jedi turned to alchemical practices to extend their lives, while some Jedi Masters, like U.D. Benner, lived centuries thanks to their long-lived species. This war wasn't just a struggle, it was the clash of two sides, bound to echo through time. In that distant age, the art of defense had not yet been forged, and so every wielder of the blade relied solely on the elegant discipline of Form 2, sharpening themselves into unmatched duelists through a century of relentless practice. It was an era when combat was second nature, when the Masters of the 100-Year Darkness stood as some of the greatest the galaxy would ever know, so skilled that later generations would seem like children by comparison. Among the Exiles rose a shadowed warrior clad in armor, destined to become one of the most fearsome duelists ever recorded. Yet beyond single combat, the Exiles hungered for power on a grander scale, and with no blasters to rely upon, they turned to the dark arts, shaping devastation itself through alchemy. From this pursuit came the first twisted beasts, shamblers, howlers, pit horrors, mere preludes to the ultimate creation. Drawing from every experiment, a dark alchemist forged towering leviathans, living weapons born of corruption, vast monstrosities that embodied the raw will of the darkness itself. The leviathans were monstrous creatures that could distort the senses of Force-sensitive individuals, causing excruciating pain and madness. Their power was truly terrifying, especially when they killed an enemy, swallowing their spirit and absorbing their life energy into their skin blisters. These hulking beasts had slaughtered countless Jedi, contributing to several victories for the Dark Forces. One Leviathan, known as the Ever-Hungry, became a favorite of a Dark Jedi leader, whose cruelty was renowned. Even centuries later, Grand Master Yoda remarked that ending the life of such a creature would be an act of mercy. The long war waged by the Dark Jedi needed more than just monsters and dark cults. It required an army. The Black Legions, led by Remulus Dreypa, likely consisted of slave soldiers from conquered worlds. However, it was the Dark Jedi fleet that posed the real threat. Led by Carnis Myr, it was speculated that the Dark Jedi might have gained control of the Starforge, an ancient weapon capable of producing endless ships and droids through the energy of stars and the Force itself. This fleet, with its unimaginable power, could have been the key to standing against the might of the Republic. In the depths of the Starforge's secrets, a conversation with the spirit of a Jedi lost to time reveals a chilling truth. Revan, who struggles with the fog of forgotten memories, learns of the ancient power that once drove the dark side of the Force. The spirit speaks cryptically, acknowledging that the dark side's origins are much older than the known Sith Lords, but that it was their kind who wielded this forbidden power with more might than those before them. The Starforge, a weapon of unimaginable strength, becomes central to the Exiles' struggle against the Jedi. But the Forge wasn't just a weapon, it was the source of the Exiles' power, hidden in a place even they lost track of. The tragic twist? The tide of the war would eventually turn when the Exiles lost control of their greatest weapon, marking a turning point in the conflict. This loss brought the Jedi closer to victory, but the story doesn't end there. A mysterious prison world was created by the Jedi to hold those corrupted by the dark side, a testament to the desperate measures taken to prevent further chaos. The shadows of this war, its betrayals, and its forgotten artifacts would echo for centuries to come. She never wanted war with the Jedi, but her writings made her discontent with Juna's leadership crystal clear. Each page reflected her growing frustration, hinting at plans to overthrow him and claim his power for herself. Remulus, a banner she could rally behind, seemed strong enough to support her. An wasn't keen on returning to the Republic yet, though he believed there was more to uncover. Ajunta, convinced they had founded an empire greater than anything the Republic had ever seen, knew they still had much to build. While Tulak Hord sided with Anna, Carnis Myr likely joined for a chance to settle his rivalry. The other Exiles? The history remains silent, leaving us guessing if they stayed out of it. The conflict was brief and fierce, and while details are scarce, we know this is where Sorzus Syn met her end. Unlike others, she didn't have a tomb, just an empty throne, a grim hint that she tried to kill Ajunta Pall and was obliterated beyond recognition. Carnis Myr, who hoped to take down Remulus, faced failure as Remulus outsmarted him. Myr had crafted a dark talisman to trap Remulus, but was thwarted. His plans turned to dust as Remulus had him stored in a stasis chamber, bound to exist for eternity. The battle raged in space, with the forces of the Republic pushing back the Dark Jedi until they were forced to the ground. The Black Legion crumbled, overwhelmed by the Jedi Order's might. In the end, it was a direct clash between Jedi and Dark Jedi, and victory was claimed by the Republic. Sorzus Syn, disgruntled, criticized Carnis Myr's leadership, claiming he lacked the innovation that had worked in past battles. Instead, she blamed Remulus Dreypa for their defeat, refusing to acknowledge any faults of her own. In a last-ditch effort, she attempted to unleash the power of her Leviathans, but the Republic ships swiftly destroyed them. With the Dark Jedi outnumbered and on the verge of collapse, only 12 remained to surrender. Confident in their victory, the Jedi did not execute them. Instead, they exiled the remaining Dark Jedi to uncharted space. Sorzus Syn, reflecting in her journal, considered this decision one of the greatest blunders in Jedi history. The Jedi, inexperienced and shaped by war, were unable to act as their predecessors might have. For them, this event was just another chapter in a long history of war, a historic moment that marked the end of an era. In the past, Jedi were known for their compassion, following a path that forbade killing unarmed foes. Instead, they let the Force decide the fate of their enemies, often leaving them to drift aimlessly in the endless void of space. This was seen as a fitting punishment for those who sought glory through death and destruction. However, what the Jedi did not foresee was that their enemies, the Dark Jedi, had a different plan. These Dark Jedi had a destination in mind and didn't need the navigational beacons used by the Republic to guide them. The dark side itself would lead them. As the war raged on, these Dark Jedi secretly searched for the ancient and mythical homeworld of the Sith, a species barely mentioned in Jedi texts. With rumors from refugees and their own secretive research, they sought the kingdom of the Sith, hoping to uncover its truths, unaware of the profound changes their quest would unleash. The Jedi of that age believed mercy meant casting their foes into the void, trusting the Force to decide their fate. For hyperspace travel was crude and perilous without beacons to guide the way, and to be hurled into uncharted space was little different from a death sentence. Explorers once mapped the stars through patient micro-jumps and anchored great stations as lighthouses of the galaxy, but beyond their reach lay only chaos and ruin. The Jedi assumed their enemies would drift forever, fading into nothingness. Yet they were blind to a darker truth: the Exiles did not wander aimlessly. Guided not by beacons, but by the shadows themselves, they sought a world whispered only in fragments of ancient text, the hidden domain of the Sith. And one among them had long been chasing this legend, gathering rumors and scraps of knowledge until destiny drew the outcast toward the heart of a forgotten empire. On Korriban, where the Sith purebloods once began and to which they often returned in death, the travelers emerged from the suffocating hold of their interstellar prison into the blinding light of a familiar sun, finding themselves surrounded by vast tombs carved from stone and sands littered with the bones of long-dead kings. According to the records, this was the fateful meeting between the Sith people and the Dark Jedi Exiles, 12 in number, and though they were greeted with open arms, a surprising gesture given the Sith's disdain for outsiders, it seemed the storm of the dark side within these new arrivals was unmistakable. The Exiles demonstrated power and knowledge that surpassed much of what was known, yet the Sith did not immediately worship them as gods, for their own kings had long wielded comparable strength, and the language barrier remained. Over the following weeks, the Exiles immersed themselves in Sith culture, studying its intricacies, preparing to undermine its structures and rise to dominance. But the question remained: who exactly were these 12? Records reveal that only 8 can be identified with certainty, while in her writings, one exile named only 5, dismissing the rest as unremarkable survivors rather than true leaders. Whether this was arrogance or envy is uncertain, but evidence suggests that several of those overlooked were far more distinguished than her words would have us believe. From the very beginning, the tale unfolds with the first exile, the one who would become known as the High General, feared and revered alike as the leader of 12 Dark Warriors. Though their campaign ended in failure against their former brethren, his followers still clung to him as their unshakable commander. He allowed his cunning ally to spearhead the discovery of a new world and its ancient people, yet all knowledge gathered would ultimately serve his throne. Renowned as the greatest duelist of his age and unmatched in raw command of the Force, he alone kept his treacherous kin in line, undefeated through the long era of darkness. Old, relentless, and driven by sheer will, he embodied the creed that only power was worthy of respect, ensuring none could rise above him. When the Exiles first set foot on their new home, he waited patiently, watching as the ancient tongue of the Sith was unraveled, already fixing his gaze on the greater empire that was yet to come. The current reigning Sith King, a powerful leader, gained the trust of his second-in-command, who helped him set a trap for the King. A skilled Dark Jedi general lured the King into a duel. Though the Sith King was no slouch in combat, the odds were stacked against him, as his opponent was one of the greatest Jedi of the era, who had embraced the dark side. With sword skills honed over a century of war, the Dark Jedi swiftly defeated the King. Afterward, the Dark Jedi claimed the King's weapon, a unique staff with blades at each end, which was infused with Sith alchemy. This weapon was far too complex for regular soldiers to use, and it appeared cursed. The Dark Jedi would torture the King with his own weapon before publicly beheading him. The Sith followers marveled not only at the Dark Jedi's strength, but also at their swift destruction of a king they had once believed invincible. This event led them to view the Dark Jedi as gods, more powerful than any king before them. The priests of the Sith revered the Dark Jedi as manifestations of their dark gods, with one Dark Jedi even being referred to as the left-handed god, a destroyer of unimaginable power. From this moment on, the Dark Jedi would take on a collective name, symbolizing their godlike power. The word Jedi came from the Sith tongue, meaning Dark Jedi, and one among them boldly claimed the title of Jari, the Dark Lord. Though he knew of the legend of the Sith, Ari, and the mighty king whose legacy gave rise to the prophecy of a chosen one, he left that sacred title untouched, fearing it would bring ruin upon their new empire. Instead, his focus turned to conquest, while another exile, Sorzus, emerged as the voice and mind shaping their path. From her writings full of vivid references to her homeland, to her mastery of alchemy and conjuring, she became the chief architect of twisted creations, summoning monsters and bending dark knowledge to forge the very foundation of the Sith. She never boasted of high rank among the Dark Exiles during the war, yet her reputation soared afterward, for she was the one who uncovered Korriban itself. Known as the Scholar, her brilliance was often dismissed or exploited by her peers, who claimed the relics she unearthed as their own. She rarely resisted, for her blade was weaker than theirs, but her mind was unmatched within the Circle of 12. None rivaled her intellect. Her writings reveal a simmering desire to unseat the Dark Lord, though she never set down her exact scheme. From the moment she arrived on Korriban, her obsession was to study the Sith, documenting their biology, their rigid castes, their weapons and venoms. She admired them deeply, noting how their mastery of the dark arts surpassed imagination. A reverence echoed even generations later. In the tombs of the Sith kings, she uncovered treasures and relics of power, one of her most cherished being the Avatar, a device that could render any tongue into knowledge while whispering the maddening echoes of the dead. With it, she mastered the Sith language and taught it swiftly to the others, all while mapping the land and its secrets. Ensuring her legacy would be carved in the stones of Korriban itself, she charted hidden hyperlanes and uncovered the truth of the ziggurat temples, learning how they funneled shadowed power into the heart of the ancient tomb. Brilliant and cunning, she forged 3 talismans across her long life. The first, a creation for one ambitious rival, became one of the most formidable artifacts of its age. The second, given to another adversary, carried equal, might yet secretly held a trap for his spirit, ensuring that even in death he would serve her schemes. The third, kept for herself, was whispered to surpass them all, though its nature remained veiled in mystery. By her 7th day on the desolate world, she breached a sacred tomb untouched for 10 millennia, its deadly traps guarding scrolls of forbidden alchemy, the preserved husk of a monstrous beast, and above all, the holocron of a long-dead king, sealing her place as a master of secrets. She cracked the secret of crafting a holocron and dove headfirst into the hidden history of an ancient bloodline, her mastery of alchemy exploding into discoveries no one had ever dreamed of. She perfected the creation of beasts for war, sharpened weapons and artifacts, and in her journal she boldly declared herself the greatest of the summoners who once fought in the long darkness. But her revelations didn't come from whispers or chants. They were the voice of the Sith calling her all along. Her knowledge grew so fast that even the Holocron's guardian grew jealous, cutting her off from forbidden incantations, yet she hungered for more. She sought spells in darker places, even as cursed scrolls clawed at her mind with visions of rage and ruin. The more she resisted, the more secrets spilled open, until she became a master of both spellcraft and alchemy, turning her tower into a crucible of endless experiments. And from her, perhaps the greatest gift or curse ever given to the Sith was born, the Code itself. A creed forged from passion, strength, and power. A philosophy that bound the Order for millennia. They thrived on taking only what was useful, wasting nothing, living by the harsh creed of strength. One voice, however, sought to twist that path into a doctrine of her own, declaring that peace, serenity, and harmony were nothing but chains of limitation. That passion would forever triumph over stillness. From there, the tale shifted to the third exile, Carnis Myr, whose own words dripped with menace. Enemies became his strength, their flesh his flesh, their will crushed beneath his own. His codex was a chilling manifesto, later etched into Sith lore, revealing a mind both cunning and corrupt. Myr was not only a manipulator, but a tactician, once an admiral whose strategies turned defeats into traps for his foes. He was whispered to be among the first to wield a true lightsaber, a weapon reshaped after the 100-year darkness, with new power coursing through its core. Carnis Myr stood as a figure of hunger and control, a master of turning others into extensions of himself, leaving behind a legacy as dangerous as it was enduring. In this tale, the origins of the modern lightsaber remain shrouded in mystery, yet fragments of history reveal how one exile forged crimson blades, even daring to shape a curved hilt, while also unlocking forbidden alchemy to craft synthetic crystals in place of natural ones. Whispers also credit the same era with conceiving the double-bladed saber, its ancient schematics preserved within dark holocrons, leading to the birth of the first saber staff drawn from designs of the Exiles themselves. For the lords between their time and later ages still wielded only swords. Yet beyond weapons, the most infamous creation was the cursed talisman, a relic that granted its master a terrifying power, the ability to twist weak minds into monstrous servants bound to the will of its wearer, abominations born from alchemy. Their grotesque forms a living mark of the Exiles' dark triumph and the shadow he left upon history. If anyone suffered the bite or scratch, the dreadful plague would seize them, twisting flesh and soul until they became a rakel, enslaved beneath the will of the cursed amulet. With that talisman, an army of horrors obeyed its master without end, yet its darkest secret was far more terrifying. It held the power to trap the wearer's very essence, granting them a form of immortality beyond death. All malice and strength were bound within, ensuring the spirit would never truly perish, and thus it rose to infamy as one of the most feared relics in Sith history. From the shadows then stepped the next exile, the fourth of their kind, a baron whose command over the Black Legions and his fiery temper marked him as a ruthless force. To him, compassion was weakness, care was enslavement, and only raw self-interest defined the true Sith. Yet even he was not immune to desire, his gaze fixed upon a priestess whose bloodline would soon become entangled in alchemy and ambition. A dangerous mix that promised power yet whispered ruin. He raged at the thought that his lineage would perish with him, and every day spent in exile across Sith space felt like chains around his soul. He sneered at his peers, branding them mongrels for bowing to stagnant rule, and soon his cage turned into loathing for the very lands he had once claimed. In his mind, only the stars themselves were worthy of his dominion, and that hunger for power would one day split the Exiles apart. Even in Uneasy Alliance, he played the long game, accepting a gift that was meant to bind his spirit, but twisting it to preserve both his body and his mind, turning deceit into an edge. With sly precision, he bent the monstrous leviathans to his will, stealing their brood for his own dark designs. And when he unleashed his might, storms answered, fire obeyed, and entire strongholds crumbled to dust beneath the crack of his fury. Zune, the fifth exile, is a strange, ghostly figure whose true nature remains a mystery. While the other exiles can be identified as human-like beings, Zune's appearance sets her apart. Her pale skin and the odd black markings on her face, possibly tattoos from her people, give her a haunting presence. As one of the commanders of the Black Legions, she once held a position of power alongside Remulus Dreypa. Initially a Jedi Guardian, her journey took a dark turn. Little is known about her actions during her exile, but there's an account by Sorzus Syn, who bitterly complains about Zun's discovery of the Yoke of Seeming, a powerful amulet that allows its wearer to transform into anyone or anything. Zun's greatest legacy, however, lies in her mastery of dark healing, a rare and elusive power among the Sith. While healing is not a natural skill for dark-side users, Zun defied expectations, proving that such powers were possible, despite the skepticism of figures like Darth Bane. Dark healing was a secret few ever mastered, always twisted and dangerous, yet one exile rose above the rest, perfecting it and hiding her knowledge away in a holocron, far from the eyes of her peers. Whispers suggest she may have even joined her life with another of the 12, their legacy echoing through descendants and bloodlines. But the tale soon shifts to a warrior unlike any other, an exile who was never a Jedi Knight, his past cloaked in mystery, yet his power undeniable. Clad in crimson armor and wielding a blade that struck terror into all challengers, he carved his name into history as the greatest duelist to ever live. Records and fragments hint that this armored figure seen among the first to step upon Korriban was none other than him, a being whose legend towers above the shadows of the Exiles. Before him, one figure bowed low, as if acknowledging a master whose legend had darkened with age. The helmet, once bright, now blackened, suggested it had not always been that way. It might once have shone red, hinting that this could be none other than the feared duelist himself. Tales said he had clashed with Jedi during the battle on a world tied to the 100-Year Darkness, a place where no second conflict was ever recorded. His blade held crystals claimed from worlds deep in Republic space, proof of his defiance, and he was remembered as the greatest of the ancient lightsaber masters, a title unmatched in the age when most Sith still fought with enchanted swords. Among the 12, his place was unquestionable. And then came another shadow, carrying a name whispered with dread, the very first to bear the title of Darth. Though not openly called an exile, the evidence bound him to their fate. Born on a distant world, he too wielded a lightsaber, and the Jedi, fearing his memory, scoured it from records across the galaxy. His legacy, like the others, was buried, yet could not be erased, for even in silence his legend endured. He fled to another world because his rivals sought to end him for the secrets he carried, and as one exile once said, they all craved each other's knowledge. He ruled for centuries, yet lived in constant fear, sealing himself in a tomb surrounded by his hidden lore, terrified his enemies would return unless, like him, they too had conquered death through forbidden arts. The scrolls in his tomb revealed he had once shared bonds with others long before their names were forgotten, proving he was among the first 12. He claimed the title of the immortal God King and shaped the word that would echo through time, Darth, a name born from the idea of triumph over death. With this, he crowned himself as the one who defied mortality, and from there the tale plunges into even stranger shadows, where the most obscure of the 12 wait to be revealed. Descending deeper, the tale reaches number 8, Bruta, the most mysterious of the Exiles. No record remains of her appearance or even her species, only fragments whispered by others and a single obscure text that names her as one of the co-founders of the Sith Empire. Much like her peers, Bruta was consumed by knowledge, gathering scrolls and books across Korriban, drawn to the power etched within them. Instead of storing her discoveries in a holocron, she forged a personal grimoire, sealed with a lock of her own design that functioned like a gatekeeper. Why she chose parchment over crystal remains unknown, but perhaps she cherished the weight of ink and page. With Bruta, the named exiles end, leaving only 4 shadowed figures, seated upon stone thrones, silent and unnamed. They are seen but once, when the last body of a broken emperor drags itself into the Valley of the Dark Lords, seeking counsel. There, within the necropolis, the thrones cradle mummified ancients, preserved by the very alchemy that cursed them, their flesh withering into bone even before death claimed them. The 4 throne figures remain frozen in silence, guardians of a legacy steeped in ruin. Their bodies rotted away upon the thrones, leaving only restless spirits bound to the tomb. Yet ancient records show glimpses of who they once were, bald, armored figures of shadow and power, standing apart from the more well-known exiles. In the old data archives, 3 such men appear among the Sith, and in one alchemist's journal, a hierarchy was drawn with an unnamed Dark Master at its peak, suggesting these were the throne figures later encountered by future generations. Once their leader struck down a rival and claimed dominion, the 12 fell into line as his shadow hands, bound by a fragile balance of equality beneath him, though anyone versed in Sith ways could see the seeds of disaster. For a time, they restrained their rivalries and instead shaped their empire, observing the enslaved species that revealed the Sith had once ruled across many worlds. Redirecting the builder caste to forge fleets rather than tombs, they armed themselves with starships, carving out the foundation of a dark empire whose shadow would stretch far beyond their age. Together, they ventured deeper into the shadows, charting the 5 sacred worlds that lined the ancient hyperlane harsh tombs left behind as they moved onward until they reached the throne world of a forgotten king. There, upon the cliffs above the people, the Dark Lords raised their palaces and remade the Citadel as a neutral stronghold, a council seat where all 12 could gather under one will. They spread their dominion further, reforging lost temples, claiming other worlds, forging prisons of heretics and breeding grounds of alchemical beasts, until at last, the shape of an empire began to emerge. For 2 years, their rule brought only discovery and expansion, each of them growing in power as secrets of the ancients came to light. But when silence fell upon the chronicles, it was not peace, it was the calm before their first great conflict. One among them, no longer patient, demanded that all they had built be turned outward, to strike back at the galaxy they had once been cast from. Another agreed, voices rising for conquest, while others hesitated, and thus the path to their secret apocalypse was set. She didn't seek war with the Jedi, but her writings made her growing dissatisfaction with Juna's leadership clear. With every page, she expressed her plans of overthrowing him and taking his place, seeing Remulus as a banner strong enough to rally behind. Though Anna was hesitant about returning to the Republic, believing it was too soon, she knew there was still much more to uncover. Ajuna, convinced they had built an empire beyond anything the Republic had seen, believed they still had work to finish. Tulak Hord sided with Anna, along with Carnis Myr, though he likely did so to finally have an excuse to fight his rival openly. The allegiance of the other exiles remains a mystery, but they might have stayed out of the conflict. The battle was swift and brutal, with little known about its details, but it marked the end of Sorzus Syn. Unlike the others, she never had a tomb, only an empty throne, possibly signifying that she had tried to kill Auna but was destroyed so thoroughly that there was nothing left of her to bury. Carnis Myr's attempt to take down Remulus ended disastrously. He had used the dark side to create an oblet that trapped Remulus, cornering him. Knowing the amulet would allow his spirit to survive, Remulus devised a stasis chamber to imprison him forever. However, the details of what happened next remain unclear. Some say Carnis Myr fell to an assassin's blade before his schemes could unfold. Others whisper he sealed himself inside the talisman, letting his body wither while his spirit endured. Whichever truth holds, his essence was bound within the cursed amulet, hidden from history for millennia, yet still alive in a twisted sense. Meanwhile, the warlord gathered his followers and fled Sith space, seeking vengeance in the Republic. But fate placed him in the path of Jedi veterans hardened by the 100-year darkness, for warriors unwilling to let old sins fade. Their patrol struck his fleet without warning, igniting a ferocious chase across the stars until both forces crashed upon the lush, untouched world of Kesh. There, among violet-skinned natives and beneath a sky whose magnetic veil silenced all cries for aid, Jedi and Sith carried their endless feud onto the ground. Weapons scarring the forests, their conflict poisoning paradise itself. In a world torn apart by chaos, the Kashiri people, innocent and unarmed, were trapped in the carnage, their very survival hanging by a thread as devastation swept across the land, threatening to erase all life. Then, in a moment that defied fate itself, both the Jedi and the shadowed warriors of their enemies suddenly realized the horror they had unleashed. Staring into the abyss of near-total annihilation, they were shaken to their core, even those who had long embraced the darkness. Hostilities ceased instantly. Reconciliation sparked between once bitter foes, and those teetering on the edge of corruption stepped back from it. Together they turned on their own master, the one they had called their greatest weapon, sealing him within the very prison he had forged for another an eternal tomb in the sands. Yet beyond this fragile truce, the struggle raged on. For among their scattered brethren, the losses were staggering. Leaders fallen, alliances shattered, and the fragile peace that once held their kind together now broken beyond repair. What had begun as a single clash of ideals had ignited a rift that would scar their people for ages, as the shadow of betrayal stretched endlessly into the future. The Sith Lords lived in constant suspicion, never trusting even those closest to them. Though no one could say if their leader's rule lasted months or centuries, the breaking point came when his spirit confessed to Revan that jealousy had consumed them, each coveting the secrets of the others. Whether it was envy of power or desperation at the edge of their lifespan, they turned on one another, with death itself looming over them. The 12 fell into chaos, shattering their order in brutal conflict. The first struck was the one called Death, who had uncovered the forbidden path of essence transfer. He faked his demise, deceived even his murderer, and vanished into the deep core, leaving behind an empty tomb to mask his escape. The others hunted him endlessly, but he was gone, lost when the hyperlane collapsed into nothingness. One by one, the survivors followed, their ends veiled in mystery, with only fragments remaining like a hidden holocron tucked away in an unremarkable tomb. A faint whisper of the darkness they once embodied. She chose to craft her tomb in plain simplicity so it would not be noticed, and the gamble paid off. For her holocron was one of the rare treasures never uncovered by Jedi or Sith alike, though fate was cruel as she perished not long after. Her chances against the surviving duelists non-existent, for two of them were the finest blade masters the galaxy had ever seen, and she likely fell to one of their strikes, while another's fate remained shrouded, her remains never found. Yet most believed she too met her end there. But the war itself closed with a thunderous clash, a single duel of legend, the unstoppable armored juggernaut against the father of their order. And in the end, the juggernaut reigned supreme, striking down his rival with the very blade that once betrayed its master, a twist of cruel poetry. For it was that same weapon he had stolen long ago to end a king. And with that, the circle closed. The 12 became one, and the mantle of Dark Lord passed to him, making him the second to bear that title in all the chronicles. Yet, though many had fallen, their legacies refused to die, echoing through millennia, for they were the first of their kind. And thus begins Chapter 4, Legacy, where the Armored Lord still lives, ruling for centuries, taking an apprentice of his own, determined to pass on the forbidden knowledge to a new generation. In a world dominated by darkness, a powerful duel awaited. Tulak Hord, a legendary Sith Lord, faced off against the fearsome Kim Val, a formidable assassin from a brutal race of Hulks. These Hulks were known for their unparalleled combat skills and dark affinity, feeding on the energy of those they defeated. Kim Val, a deadly opponent, had the capacity to consume Force-sensitive lives, particularly Sith Lords. However, despite the overwhelming strength of Kim Val, Tulak emerged victorious in their intense duel. Impressed by his opponent's power, Tulak chose not to kill Kim Val, but to make him an offer: serve me, and I will ensure you feast on the blood and flesh of Force users. Kim Val, bound by an oath of loyalty, became Tulak's most devoted follower. With this alliance forged, Tulak gathered the Sith Empire's forces and declared war on the Republic. A war veiled in secrecy, known only through a few recorded battles, including the Battle of Yin and the Battle of Kabosh. This hidden conflict set the stage for Tulak's rise. At the Battle of Yin, despite arriving late, Tulak single-handedly repelled a Republic assault, feeding on the power of fallen Jedi. The power of the Sith, amplified by their unholy alliance, surged as they continued their hidden war. After the monumental Battle of Yin, the Empire, led by Kamal and Tenella, triumphed over both the Republic and the Rebels. It was during this clash that Tulak Hord, a Sith Lord, performed a forbidden ritual, channeling all the power of the Jedi army into himself, marking the peak of his strength. Kamal, having witnessed Hord slaughtering 1,000 Jedi, hailed it as the most impressive act of warfare ever seen in Star Wars, a feat that echoed the deadly power of the 100-year darkness and its survivors. Despite his newfound power, Hord decided to preserve Kemal in a stasis chamber, though the reasons remain unclear. His decision to keep such a powerful ally in isolation proved to be a grave error. Soon after, Hord encountered another Sith Lord, Sig, who sought to serve him. Initially dismissing Sig, Hord's opinion changed when Sig defeated his top general in a duel, earning a place at his side. Sig's leadership soon led to more victories, and Hord grew wary of his rising fame. In an act of paranoia, Hord ordered Sig's assassination. However, it was not Sig who would betray him, but his own apprentice, Tenella. A coward at heart, Tenella did not challenge Hord in an honorable duel, but instead struck him down from behind, sealing the Dark Lord's fate. While the war raged on and he was distracted, the Empire crumbled without his ruthless command, driven back by the Republic until his fall sealed their retreat. Whispers claim his end came at the blade of a cursed weapon, the same sword once used in another dark betrayal, binding his legacy to blood and doom. What makes him striking is that unlike the first exile, he was never a Jedi at all, but a warrior who joined the dark cause during the ancient schism, carving his own path into legend. His apprentice's fate remains clouded, but his mantle passed to a ruler born of Sith blood, one destined to carry the title of Dark Lord. Laid to rest in his tomb on Korriban, his relics, crystal, writings, mask, and holocron were entombed with him, though much of his history was lost when the Jedi stormed the planet, stripping and destroying Sith lore in their purge. Yet his tomb endured, lined with traps to test the worthy, until the era of the Jedi Civil War, when one who had turned from darkness braved the gauntlet and unearthed his black mask. Still, his legend lingered beyond the grave. For centuries later, his lightsaber surfaced again, a weapon echoing with the shadow of a Sith Lord who refused to be forgotten. As a restless spirit, fragments of his voice endured through recordings alongside relics he once possessed. Some believed to be creations of his rival, others said to be forged by his own hand. Yet the tale twists when the descendant of his only adversary set out during the Great Galactic War to reclaim each of these relics, binding past to present in a grim legacy. Another shadowed figure, a guardian of a long-lost temple, faded from history, though her sanctuary remained for a time. As for the mysterious throne-bound ancients, stories claim they ruled unchallenged for centuries under their Dark Master, though other accounts whisper they perished in the final cataclysm, their withered forms enthroned by loyal attendants. Ages later, one seeker approached them in his failing body, begging for escape from mortality. They welcomed him as a would-be equal, offering the empty throne that had once been intended for another. Yet he spurned their invitation and demanded another path. Relenting, they revealed the secret of possession, guiding him to claim a new vessel. Meanwhile, the spirit of the fallen leader endured, trapped in his own tomb, wandering for ages as memory decayed, his identity dissolving into sorrow across the endless stretch of centuries. Grief weighed on him like chains, regret his only companion as he replayed the memory of striking down his own master. When the wandering knight discovered his restless spirit, the fallen one spoke in broken fragments of his past, his pride, and his ruin. Learning that the Shadow Order still survived and spread chaos across the stars, he cried out in despair, calling them fools destined to destroy themselves. He confessed how the lure of power blinded him, how he once believed himself unstoppable, only to watch his kind devour each other for secrets and scraps of strength. Above all, he longed for forgiveness from the master he had betrayed. Yet the knight's voice carried compassion, urging him to forgive himself and to listen to the light that still reached for him. At last, after millennia and torment, the first of the Exiles surrendered to peace, dissolving into the Force. But the galaxy did not rest while he faded into light. Another of the 12 awoke, and with him came the rise of a brotherhood called the Doomed, guardians bound in penance to keep watch over the weapon that would one day return. Long ago, a supply ship of Sith crash-landed during the Great Hyperspace War, unable to escape, and like the exiled 12 before them, they declared themselves gods to the Kashri. Over time, the War of Jedi and ancient Sith became nothing more than legend to the Kashiri, who called them Guardians and Destroyers. Seizing that myth, the stranded Sith claimed the title of Guardians, ruling for 1,000 years as the Lost Tribe, blind to the presence of the Doomed. That ignorance shattered when two members of the tribe uncovered the forgotten civilization. One, a cowardly schemer, unleashed a sealed power he mistook for a weapon. From the prison emerged Remulus, furious and unbroken, mocking the tribe as pretenders and showing them the gulf between their diluted knowledge and true Sith might. With his voice alone, he raised an army, turned slaves into zealots, and bound the traitorous schemer to his side. Yet not all bent to his will, for among the tribe a princess sought alliance with the doomed to find a way to end his reign before his vengeance consumed them all. His memories were blurred from awakening after such a long slumber, but as his pursuit of power unfolded, fragments began to return. He recalled the leviathans he had stolen and hidden deep within a fiery volcano. At first, the lost tribe dismissed him, thinking he was just another Sith, unaware that he was one of the original Jedi. That illusion shattered when he raised his amulet and summoned the sleeping Leviathans, bending their will to his command. With every soul they devoured, his strength and forgotten memories surged back, guiding him toward the lone spacefaring vessel guarded by the doomed. Yet madness consumed him, and betrayal soon followed, as Spinner allied with the princess to stop his escape and prevent his fury from spreading across the galaxy. Their struggle led them to the ship known as the Last Hope, where a brutal clash erupted. Though neither their blades nor the Force could match his might, their cunning allowed them to set the vessel on a doomed course into the volcano. With a desperate leap, Takar and Spinner escaped as the Last Hope plunged into the fire, dragging him into a violent end. And yet, in the shadows of a forgotten tomb, her spirit lingered, waiting until the day a Jedi would awaken it once more. Once a fallen warrior who had lost everything after the Purge, he wandered into shadows, consumed by anger and the need for vengeance rather than coin. Chasing his quarry across a desolate world, he stumbled upon a tomb where a whisper lured him deeper. Inside, he discovered a hidden chamber holding a Sith holocron, and from it emerged the spirit of a long-forgotten master who revealed her ancient path, one born from leaving the light behind. She spoke of shaping an apprentice who once knew the ways of the Jedi but had been broken, someone who carried anger, despair, and the scars of betrayal. Seeing him as the perfect vessel, she extended her offer, and he accepted, calling her master and embracing the dark teachings. This moment marked the beginning of his transformation, laying the foundation for a new kind of Sith Lord, one forged not only in power but also in wisdom and pain, unlike any who came before. He had a vision, not for power alone, but for reshaping the galaxy in ways the Jedi never could, and under the guidance of his master, he trained for decades within shadowed halls, until the wars above had already ended and empires had crumbled, yet he emerged carrying the true essence of the dark path itself. Meanwhile, far away, another lord fled into the hidden depths, carving out a kingdom where he was worshipped as an eternal ruler, his followers revering him as more than mortal, though their strength could never match that of the ancient empire. And when isolation sealed his dominion, paranoia drove him to surround himself with tomes and secrets, vowing to take his knowledge into death itself. But even then, his cunning endured, for he crafted a labyrinth tomb with false chambers and a deceptive holocron to ensnare intruders, ensuring his true resting place and his final secrets remained untouched. For ages, his body and library lay buried in secrecy, while the cult that adored him lingered in the shadows, guarding the tomb and fortress with blind devotion, convinced he would rise again to command them. When the hidden paths through the deep core opened, another seeker came upon the world and uncovered the forbidden art of essence transfer, recording the knowledge, though never daring to wield it. That single record drifted through time until it reached the hands of a dark master who braved the planet himself, brushed aside the feeble guardians, and ventured into the tomb where he found not only false traps and a counterfeit holocron, but at last, the true relic with the secret to survival beyond death. Yet even he left unaware of the deeper vaults still hidden. The holocron passed on, resurfacing in later wars and gifting its crimson shard to another who walked the shadowed path, while the true resting place would remain lost until long centuries later, when a desperate Sith, plagued by decay and denied aid by every other ancient spirit, sent his follower to unearth the final chamber at last. The warlock sent his most trusted to seize knowledge straight from the source, then spoke with the holocron's gatekeeper and convinced it to reveal the path to the true burial chamber. Amused by the challenge, the gatekeeper shared the location, expecting the Sith to perish in the trials, perhaps even aware that the ancient spirit still lingered. But the gatekeeper underestimated the warlock's dark strength. At the keep he found a pitiful cult, ragged and untrained, yet still bound to the shadow. He mocked them, then with a cruel illusion made them see each other as copies of himself, driving them into frenzy until they tore one another apart. With a storm of lightning, he ended the rest, sparing only one to lead him to the chamber. Forcing the holocron to reveal its code, he was told to place it in the creator's chest. Yet he wisely turned to study the books first. In that moment, the last cultist betrayed him, setting the holocron upon his master's corpse. The ancient husk awakened, draining the follower's essence and returning to life. Now reborn, the spirit rose to face the warlock, not with blades, but with will and power, hurling him through illusions of volcanic ruin as their clash of minds and force began. The chamber blazed with fire and molten fury as he mocked the other for bending to another's will, something no true master of darkness would ever allow. But his foe had endured enough and struck back, calling out that all the torment before him was nothing but a hollow illusion, the same trick once used on blind cultists. He named him a coward, claiming that fear was all that pulsed within, then twisted the illusion against its maker, turning his paranoia inward. In terror, he saw the flames consume every book, every scroll, every shred of knowledge he treasured, until his own fear unraveled him from within, leaving only a lifeless husk crumpled on the floor. Victorious, the warlock gathered what fragments of wisdom remained useful and departed the fortress forever. Elsewhere, the cursed talisman of another exile endured far longer than its master, lost across centuries until it surfaced during the Mandalorian Wars. Not Sith nor Jedi unearthed it first, but Mandalorians, whose chief scientist wielded its power to twist foes into blaster-bearing monstrosities. Yet visions of doom came to a circle of seers, who dispatched one of their own alongside an ally to hunt the relic down. On the world of Jebel, they confronted the Mandalorian, only to find a mind utterly broken by the very power he sought to command. Captured by the Mandalorians and dragged into their laboratory, Zane stumbled upon a far darker revelation the warlords had uncovered, one of the dreaded amulets of Remulus Dreypa. Hungering for a force-sensitive host, the talisman abandoned its captors and lunged for him, revealing its true master plan: possession. Yet in that desperate moment, Celeste appeared and tore the cursed relic from him, only to have it cling to her instead. Through the amulet's grip, she beheld the spirit of Carnis Myr himself, still lingering, and under his sway she accepted his hand. With newfound power, she turned the Rakghoul Horde upon the Mandalorians and claimed the world of Jebel, poised to unleash the plague across the galaxy. But Zane reached through the corruption, helping her see past the amulet's poison, and for a fleeting instant she broke free. Realizing she had become a danger to all, she begged him to end her life. Instead, he sealed her within a stasis pod, trapped but preserved, until the amulet could be destroyed. Wars raged on, centuries passed, and she was left forgotten yet not alone. For within that prison, bound together for 4,000 years, Celeste and the spirit of Carnis Myr endured, the talisman turning her very existence into his eternal cage until at last, the pod cracked open on a long-abandoned world, its systems reawakened by a distant disturbance in the Force. Dust swirled in the dim red light of Jebel's dying sun as Celeste awoke, gasping, her body unchanged by time, yet her soul worn thin by millennia of silent struggle. The amulet remained fused to her chest, pulsing like a second heart, but Carnis Myr's voice, once commanding, triumphant, was now fractured, weakened, a prisoner of his own design. The stasis had not only preserved her, but slowly unraveled his hold. The endless years of shared imprisonment eroding his essence, even as her will, honed by endless resistance, grew stronger in the dark. Miners unearthed the talisman and sold it off to smugglers, but in time, Celeste was discovered and awakened from her long slumber by a dark warrior cloaked in shadow. She quickly realized the Mandalorians had failed, and worse, the galaxy now bent beneath the rule of a reborn Sith Order. The ancient spirit bound to the talisman rejoiced, seeing in the dark warrior the perfect vessel, the perfect puppet. But Celeste struck back, clashing with him in a furious duel, while the spirit whispered venom in both their ears, tempting her to surrender and luring him with visions of ultimate conquest. She resisted, knowing what doom would follow if the talisman fell into his grasp, and he too refused, unwilling to trade one master for another. Defeated and disarmed, Celeste seized her last chance, channeling the artifact's cursed power to twist the legion of soldiers into ghastly thralls under her command, forcing the Dark Warrior to retreat. Isolated on the desolate moon, She remained trapped with the Spirit's whispers for 20 long years, slowly unraveling as she lured more Imperials to their fate, binding them to her growing horde. Madness creeping ever closer, she was still bound to the talisman when at last the Rebel Alliance arrived, and with them, the Twins of Destiny who would change everything. She faced the monstrous army and the sinister presence lurking in her ear, driven by whispers to hand over the twins so the cursed amulet could claim them. With her mind clouded, she clashed against the young warrior, defeating him with ease and mocking his lack of skill, demanding to know his true purpose. Just as despair threatened to consume her, his sister intervened, proving their strength by resisting the plague that felled others. The amulet leapt free, seeking to claim the brother, but instead latched onto the sister, leaving the tormented guardian finally free from the ancient voice that had haunted her for centuries. Yet the silence crushed her, a reminder that everything she knew was gone, leaving her utterly alone. Watching the sister struggle, she realized the cursed burden was hers alone to carry. With grim resolve, she struck the talisman free and bound it once more to herself, sealing her fate as its eternal jailer. She gave one last warning that his path was forever shadowed, then hurled him back with the Force and walked away, seizing rebel ships to disappear into the stars. More than a century later, she returned in the Legacy era, claiming a warship called the Iron Sun and twisting its crew into monsters before vanishing into hidden space. There she lingered, her will unbroken even as the cursed talisman whispered endlessly, until another descendant crossed her path. The new Skywalker and his companions stumbled upon the Iron Sun, only to be struck by the plague, but with a rare power he purged the infection and restored life, a feat so profound that the weary Jedi chose at last to stand by his side. Together, they struck down a Dark Lord. Yet the talisman's creator was enthralled by the Skywalker's strength, wearing her down until full possession was his. With her body under his control, he ensnared the young Skywalker and reached out across the void to forge an unholy pact, offering secrets of alchemy as the final lure. He met the Sith and Cade as arranged, and after proving his strange ability to heal, a bargain was struck. But it was all a ruse, a trap woven by Cade and Celeste to draw their foe into the open. The moment the Sith lowered his guard, the hidden allies emerged from the shadows, blasters drawn, lightsabers ignited. Cade stepped forward, his voice cold and resolute. "You should have stayed in the dark." Before the Sith could react, Celeste activated the energy dampener, cutting off his connection to the Force. The trap had sprung, and there would be no escape. She was never given a tomb or a resting place, leaving behind only her journal, the very chronicle that preserved her secrets. The writings passed into the archives, where wise masters scribbled notes in the margins, before falling into the hands of others who raided the vaults and added their own grim commentary, finally binding it within a dark tome. In time, that book reached a legendary Grand Master, who became the last to inscribe his thoughts. Yet one mystery remains a chilling fragment about her amulet. She spoke of forging 3 talismans, one given to Carnis, one to Remulus, and a third, the greatest of them all, whose fate is unknown. If such a relic was ever completed, then the terrifying possibility exists that she endured, hidden in shadow for over 7,000 years, watching galactic events from afar, waiting for her moment. And so the tale closes. The dark saga of the 12 exiles who birthed an empire of shadows. Their legacy endured far longer than expected, their influence echoing across the ages, their downfall and triumphs entwined in a history both haunting and enthralling. It is almost poetic how the tale of the Dark Order loops back to its very beginning, a cycle of shadow that feels both inevitable and eternal. This chronicle, forged from scattered fragments and hidden lore, stands as perhaps the most complete picture of their rise and legacy ever gathered in one place. Tracing the origins of corruption was no easy task, yet every piece assembled unveils how the exile of 12 figures during the 100-year darkness laid the foundation for an empire of fear and ambition. Some sought immortality, others conquest. Some forged codes and talismans that cursed generations to come, but together they became the architects of a legacy that haunted the galaxy for millennia. Researching these fragments, deciphering secrets buried in myth, was not just a labor of effort, but a fascination, an ode to the ancient exiles whose shadows remain larger than life. Though much of their story survives only in whispers, visions, and fragmented accounts, the mystery itself grants them a certain reverence. In the end, this work becomes less a record and more a love letter to the earliest Sith, a saga that invites every reader to ponder. Among the 12, whose path would you follow? And under whose shadow would you choose to walk? Descending deeper, the tale reaches number 8, Bruta, the most mysterious of the Exiles. No record remains of her appearance or even her species, only fragments whispered by others and a single obscure text that names her as one of the co-founders of the Sith Empire. Much like her peers, Bruta was consumed by knowledge, gathering scrolls and books across Korriban, drawn to the power etched within them. Instead of storing her discoveries in a holocron, she forged a personal grimoire, sealed with a lock of her own design that functioned like a gatekeeper. Why she chose parchment over crystal remains unknown, but perhaps she cherished the weight of ink and page. With Bruta, the named Exiles end, leaving only 4 shadowed figures, seated upon stone thrones, silent and unnamed. They are seen but once, when the last body of a broken emperor drags itself into the Valley of the Dark Lords, seeking counsel. There, within the necropolis, the thrones cradle mummified ancients, preserved by the very alchemy that cursed them, their flesh withering into bone even before death claimed them. The 4 throne figures remain frozen in silence, guardians of a legacy steeped in ruin.